You drive past empty storefronts where your favorite restaurant used to be. The 4 Lease signs multiplying like warnings nobody wants to read. Ontario's economic foundation is cracking beneath our feet, and when it gives way, these 10 cities won't just struggle, they'll fall first and hardest. Thunder Bay already lost 8% of its population since 2016, while Windsor's real estate values dropped 12% in just 1 year. These aren't isolated incidents. They're early tremors of something bigger coming. If you live in one of these places or know someone who does, what happens next could change everything overnight. Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay sits at the head of Lake Superior, looking prosperous from the highway with its massive grain terminals and busy port. But drive through the neighborhoods and you'll see a different story unfolding. This city handles 40% of Canada's grain exports, moving over 10 million tons annually through its port facilities. Yet that impressive statistic masks a dangerous vulnerability that's already showing cracks. The numbers tell the real story. Thunder Bay's population dropped 8% since 2016, the steepest decline among major Ontario cities. Young people aren't just leaving for university, they're not coming back. Youth unemployment sits 15% above the provincial average. And when you dig deeper, you understand why. The port employs thousands during harvest season, but offers little year-round stability for anyone under 30. Here's what makes Thunder Bay so fragile. Everything depends on grain moving through the Great Lakes shipping system. When global grain prices drop or shipping routes change, the entire local economy feels it within weeks. The 2020 pandemic showed just how quickly things can unravel. Port activity plummeted 30% overnight, triggering layoffs that rippled through restaurants, retail stores, and service businesses throughout the city. But competition is tightening the squeeze even further. Vancouver's port expansions and new rail connections are pulling grain shipments west, while upgraded facilities in Montreal capture eastern markets. Thunder Bay's share of Canadian grain exports dropped from 45% to 40% in just 3 years, and industry analysts predict further declines as infrastructure investments favor other routes. The human cost is becoming visible everywhere. Downtown Thunder Bay has 23% commercial vacancy rates, nearly double the provincial average. Families who built their lives around seasonal port work now struggle through longer off-seasons with fewer opportunities. Even the city's budget feels the strain, with property tax revenues declining as population drops and commercial values stagnate. While Thunder Bay struggles with geography and shipping, another northern city faces even more isolation challenges. Sudbury. Sudbury's skyline tells a story of prosperity built on what lies beneath the ground. The massive headframes and processing facilities of Vail and Glencore dominate the landscape, employing thousands and generating billions in revenue. But walk through the residential neighborhoods and you'll notice something troubling. Too many houses for sale, too many young families packing up, and too many conversations about whether it's time to leave. 25% of Sudbury's economy depends directly on these two mining giants. That's not just the miners themselves, but the contractors, suppliers, restaurants, and retail stores that exist because mining paychecks flow through the community. When nickel prices dropped 35% in 2023, both companies announced immediate layoffs affecting over 1,500 workers. The ripple effects hit within weeks. Here's the part that should worry everyone. Automation is accelerating faster than anyone expected. Vail's new automated hauling systems eliminated 200 jobs last year alone, and company executives openly discussed plans to cut 40% of traditional mining positions by 2030. Remote-controlled equipment and artificial intelligence don't need lunch breaks, benefits, or local housing. The numbers paint a stark picture. Sudbury's unemployment rate jumped to 8.4% following the recent layoffs, well above Ontario's provincial average. But here's what makes recovery so difficult. The healthcare and retail sectors that might absorb displaced workers simply can't handle the volume. Local hospitals are already understaffed, and downtown retail vacancy rates hit 18% as consumer spending dropped. You'd be surprised how quickly a mining town can hollow out when the industry contracts. Families with transferable skills leave first, taking their spending power with them. Those who remain face declining property values, reduced city services, and fewer opportunities for their children. The cycle accelerates as businesses close and tax revenues shrink. From mining dependency in the north, we move to manufacturing vulnerability in southwestern Ontario. Windsor. Windsor's Ambassador Bridge carries more trade between Canada and the United States than any other crossing, with billions in goods flowing daily between two nations. The city built its identity around automotive manufacturing, And for decades, that strategy worked brilliantly. But drive through Windsor today, and you'll see the cracks forming in what once seemed like an unshakable foundation. 32% of Windsor's workforce depends directly on the automotive sector. That's not just assembly line workers, but engineers, parts suppliers, logistics coordinators, and thousands of support jobs that exist because cars get built here. When Ford announced its Oakville plant closure in 2023, eliminating 5,000 jobs, Windsor felt the shock waves immediately. Those weren't just statistics, they were neighbors, family members, and customers who suddenly had no income. The electric vehicle transition is reshaping everything faster than most people realize. Traditional combustion engine plants require massive retooling investments that many companies simply won't make. Meanwhile, new electric vehicle factories are being built closer to battery suppliers and tech centers, often bypassing established automotive cities like Windsor entirely. But here's the bigger threat. Cross-border trade policies could devastate Windsor overnight. The city's economy depends on seamless movement of goods and workers between Canada and the United States. Industry analysts warn that proposed trade policy changes could reduce cross-border commerce by 60%, turning Windsor's greatest geographic advantage into a liability. The housing market already reflects these concerns. Real estate values dropped 12% year over year, the steepest decline in southwestern Ontario. Commercial vacancy rates downtown hit 21% as businesses struggle with reduced foot traffic and spending power. You can see entire blocks where storefronts that thrived for decades now display "For Lease" signs. What happens to a city when its primary industry undergoes fundamental transformation, while international trade relationships become unpredictable? Windsor may be showing us the answer in real time. While Windsor battles automotive decline, another border city faces unique jurisdictional challenges: Sarnia. Sarnia's Chemical Valley stretches along the St. Clair River like an industrial cathedral, with massive refineries and processing plants that have powered the local economy for over a century. The complex employs 8,000 people directly and supports thousands more through contractors and suppliers. But those towering smokestacks and sprawling facilities now represent both prosperity and peril for a city caught between environmental reality and economic necessity. The pressure is mounting from multiple directions. Carbon tax policies already cost Chemical Valley operators over $40 million annually, and those costs keep rising. Imperial Oil's refinery, which employs 750 workers directly, is actively considering closure rather than investing in required emissions reductions. That's not just speculation. It's been discussed openly in corporate earnings calls and regulatory filings. Here's the reality that keeps city planners awake at night. New air quality regulations will force Chemical Valley companies to spend $2 billion on upgrades over the next 5 years or face mandatory shutdowns. Many facilities are already operating on thin margins due to international competition and fluctuating energy prices. The math simply doesn't work for older plants that would need complete overhauls to meet new standards. The shipping industry adds another layer of vulnerability. Port traffic through Sarnia dropped 22% as Great Lakes shipping declines, reducing both direct employment and the demand for chemical products that move through the region. Container ships increasingly bypass the Great Lakes entirely, favoring coastal ports with better international connections. You can already see the economic strain in everyday life. Downtown Sarnia's commercial vacancy rate reached 17%, and property values stagnated as uncertainty grows about the area's industrial future. Families with portable skills are quietly making exit plans, while those tied to Chemical Valley face an impossible choice between environmental progress and economic survival. From chemical dependency, we examine how smaller cities struggle with manufacturing job losses. Chatham, Kent. Chatham, Kent sprawls across some of Ontario's richest farmland, where endless fields of corn, soybeans, and tomatoes once guaranteed steady work in processing plants that turn crops into canned goods and frozen foods. Drive through the region today and you'll still see those fertile fields. But the factories that made this area an agricultural powerhouse are disappearing one by one, leaving entire communities scrambling for alternatives that simply don't exist. The unemployment rate tells the story: 7.8%, the highest in southwestern Ontario. That number has barely budged since the Heinz plant closure in 2014 eliminated 740 jobs in a single devastating blow. A decade later, the economic wound still hasn't healed. Former Heinz workers either left the region entirely or accepted lower-paying positions that don't come close to replacing those lost manufacturing wages. Climate change is reshaping the agricultural foundation that everything else depends on. Extreme weather events damage crop yields by 15% over the past 3 years, reducing demand for local processing capacity. Meanwhile, automation eliminates jobs faster than the agricultural sector can create new ones. Modern processing facilities require half the workforce of older plants, and many companies find it cheaper to build automated facilities elsewhere than upgrade existing operations. The human cost shows up in the demographics. Young people leave Chatham-Kent at a rate 23% higher than the provincial average, taking their energy and spending power with them. Main streets in towns like Chatham, Dresden, and Wallaceburg feature too many empty storefronts and too few customers to support the businesses that remain. What happens when a region built on agricultural abundance can no longer convert that abundance into stable employment? Chatham-Kent offers a glimpse of the answer. Slow decline disguised as rural tranquility, where the land remains productive but the people who work it can't make a living. Agricultural challenges extend beyond processing to affect entire regional economies. North Bay. North Bay sits on the shores of Lake Nipissing, looking stable and secure with its government buildings, military base, and established institutions that have anchored the local economy for generations. Many residents work for federal agencies or 22-wing military base, drawing steady paychecks that seemed immune to the boom-bust cycles affecting resource-dependent communities. But that sense of security is evaporating as Ottawa's budget pressures force cuts that hit government towns hardest. The numbers reveal a troubling pattern. 22-wing is eliminating 400 positions by 2025 as part of military restructuring, while federal government employment across the region declined 15% since 2020. These aren't just statistics. They represent the backbone of North Bay's middle class, disappearing through attrition and downsizing that shows no signs of slowing. Population decline accelerates the problems. North Bay lost 6% of its residents in the last census period, and the trend is worsening as younger federal employees transfer to larger centers or leave government service entirely. When government workers leave, they take their spending power with them, creating a cascade effect through local businesses that depend on stable customer bases. Infrastructure consolidation compounds the employment losses. Hospital services are being centralized to reduce costs, eliminating dozens of healthcare positions, while school board consolidations cut administrative and teaching jobs. These changes might make fiscal sense on paper, but they remove another layer of stable employment from a community already struggling with federal cutbacks. The housing market reflects the broader economic uncertainty. Property values stagnated while neighboring communities grew, and downtown commercial vacancy rates climbed to 16%. You can walk North Bay's main streets and count the empty storefronts that once housed thriving businesses supported by government paychecks. What happens when a city built on public sector stability faces systematic downsizing from its primary employer? North Bay is discovering that government dependency can be just as risky as relying on private industry. Government dependency creates different vulnerabilities than private sector reliance. Sault Ste. Marie. Sault Ste. Marie's massive Algoma steel complex dominates the waterfront like an industrial fortress, its blast furnaces and rolling mills employing 2,600 workers who produce millions of tons of steel annually. The forestry mills scattered throughout the region add another layer of industrial strength, processing timber from northern Ontario's vast forests. But walk through the residential neighborhoods and you'll notice something troubling. Too many houses belonging to retirees, too few young families, and growing uncertainty about whether these cornerstone industries can survive much longer. Algoma Steel carries a crushing $500 million debt burden that threatens its survival despite recent restructuring efforts. International steel competition, particularly from subsidized overseas producers, squeezes profit margins while environmental compliance costs continue rising. The company has survived multiple bankruptcy proceedings, but each financial crisis leaves workers wondering if the next downturn will be the final one. The forestry sector tells an even more devastating story. 1,200 jobs vanished since 2019 when U.S. tariffs made Canadian lumber exports economically unviable. Mills that operated for decades shut down permanently, leaving entire communities without their economic foundation. The ripple effects hit logging contractors, trucking companies, and equipment suppliers who built their businesses around steady timber processing. Cross-border commerce dropped 18%, eliminating transportation and logistics jobs that connected Sault Ste. Marie to U.S. markets. The international bridge that once symbolized economic opportunity now carries less traffic each year, reducing customs positions, trucking jobs, and warehouse employment. Demographics compound every other challenge. 28% of Sault Ste. Marie's population is over 65, the highest rate in Northern Ontario. Young people leave for education and don't return, creating a cycle where the tax base shrinks while demand for senior services increases. Who's going to replace the aging workforce when the steel mill and remaining forestry operations finally need new workers? Steel and forestry challenges reflect broader manufacturing vulnerabilities across the province. Timmins stretches across the boreal forest of northeastern Ontario, surrounded by wilderness so vast that the nearest major city sits over 300 kilometers away. For over a century, gold mining has sustained this isolated community, creating wealth from the precious metal hidden deep underground. But drive through Timmins today, and you'll sense the anxiety beneath the surface as the gold runs out and geography becomes a trap rather than a treasure. Gold production dropped 30% as high-grade ore deposits near depletion, forcing mining companies to dig deeper and spend more for smaller yields. The economics are becoming unsustainable, and Newmont Corporation is actively considering closure of its Porcupine operations, which would eliminate 1,400 jobs in a single devastating blow. That's not just speculation, it's been discussed openly in corporate earnings calls and feasibility studies. Geographic isolation makes recovery nearly impossible when major employers leave. Unlike Southern Ontario cities that can attract alternative industries, Timmins sits too far from major transportation corridors, suppliers, and customer bases to interest most businesses. The cost of shipping goods in and out makes manufacturing economically unviable, while service industries can't survive without a stable population base. The cost of living tells the brutal truth about isolation economics. Everything costs 25% more than the provincial average, despite wages that haven't kept pace with inflation. Groceries, gasoline, utilities, and consumer goods all carry premium prices because of transportation costs and limited competition. Families struggle to make ends meet even with mining wages, and the situation becomes impossible when those jobs disappear. You can already see the warning signs throughout the community. Commercial vacancy rates downtown hit 21%, and property values stagnated as uncertainty grows about the mining sector's future. Young people leave for education and don't return, understanding that career opportunities simply don't exist in a one-industry town facing industry decline. Mining towns share similar isolation challenges, but some face additional demographic crises. Elliott Lake reinvented itself as Canada's retirement haven after uranium mining collapsed in the 1990s, marketing affordable housing and natural beauty to seniors seeking peaceful golden years. The strategy worked brilliantly at first, attracting retirees who bought homes, supported local businesses, and created a stable tax base. But walk through the community today, and you'll discover that the retirement paradise model has become an economic nightmare that's slowly strangling the city. 45% of Elliott Lake's population is over 65, creating service demands that no small community can sustain. The math simply doesn't work when nearly half your residents require increasing healthcare, transportation, and social services while contributing minimal economic activity. Property taxes skyrocketed 35% in just 5 years as the city desperately tries to fund services for an aging population with a shrinking workforce. Healthcare infrastructure is collapsing under the strain. The hospital emergency department reduced hours due to chronic staff shortages, forcing seniors to travel over an hour to Sudbury for urgent care. Recruiting healthcare professionals to an isolated community with limited career opportunities has become nearly impossible, creating a crisis that worsens each year as the population ages further. The economic foundation continues eroding as spending power declines. Retail and service businesses close regularly because seniors on fixed incomes can't support the commercial activity needed to sustain local commerce. Downtown vacancy rates reach 28%, and many remaining businesses survive only because they have no competitors, rather than because they're thriving. Young workers flee as quickly as they arrive, understanding that career opportunities don't exist in a community designed exclusively for retirees. Without working-age residents, the tax base shrinks while service costs increase, creating an unsustainable spiral that accelerates each year. What happens when a retirement community can no longer afford to care for its retirees? Demographic challenges aren't limited to mining towns. They're spreading to unexpected places. Cornwall. Cornwall sits at the intersection of three jurisdictions where Ontario meets Quebec and New York State, a geographic position that once promised endless opportunities for trade, manufacturing, and cross-border commerce. The city built its economy around paper mills, textile plants, and chemical facilities that employed thousands of workers for generations. But drive through Cornwall's industrial districts today, and you'll see too many empty factories, too many for sale signs, and too many residents commuting elsewhere because the local jobs simply don't exist anymore. Manufacturing employment collapsed 28% since 2015 as company after company either automated operations or moved production to lower-cost locations. The Domtar paper mill closure in 2023 eliminated 300 positions in a single devastating blow, removing another pillar from an industrial base that's been steadily crumbling for over a decade. Cornwall's border location creates unexpected complications for economic development. While residents increasingly commute to Montreal for work, those paychecks don't benefit the local economy the way jobs based in Cornwall would. Cross-border commuters buy gas, groceries, and services in Montreal, leaving Cornwall's commercial districts struggling with reduced foot traffic and spending power. Infrastructure decay compounds every other challenge. 40% of Cornwall's roads require major repairs, but the shrinking tax base can't fund necessary maintenance while also supporting basic city services. Industrial sites that might attract new businesses often lack the modern utilities and transportation access that contemporary manufacturers require. The downtown core reflects the broader economic malaise. Commercial vacancy rates climb to 22% as businesses close or relocate to areas with stronger customer bases. You can walk entire blocks where storefronts that once housed thriving enterprises now display faded "For Lease" signs that have been there for months or even years. What happens when a city loses its economic foundation while watching its residents work elsewhere? Cornwall shows how proximity to prosperity doesn't guarantee participation in it, and how jurisdictional advantages can become economic traps when local industries disappear.